Hi guys, Miss Zatarine here. You guys have been coming up with a lot of awesome poems lately, and today I want you choosing a new topic for your poem or going back to an old one. But if you are going to choose a new topic, then good thing you have that handy dandy list of poem ideas in your notebook that you can always go back to. And I'm going to start off with a little mini story today, and the story is about seashells. And you can do a lot of cool things with seashells, right? You can make so many different things. You can make sand castles. You can make shapes out of seashells that you find on the beach, right? You can put them in a jar. You can listen to them. You can do so many different things with them. You can make different things. You can see what you have. And they're kind of like poems because no matter what the words are in your poems, you can organize your words in different ways. And poems can be made into different things too. They can have different shapes and have different structures, what we call. So today, I want to teach you I can experiment with different structures and choose a structure that is the right fit for what I want to say in my poem. I can do this by starting with the topic, putting it into one structure, then another, then choosing the best fit for what I want to say. So let's start off with what I mean. Like I talked about structure a little bit. We have a lot of poems, but we can write a similar poem, but in different structures or different shapes, different ways. We can organize them differently. And the way you do this is you start with a topic. And I already talked about that. You can go to the list you have in your notebook, think of a topic you want to write about, or you can go use a poem that you've already written. And that, if you've used a poem you've already written, it's already in one kind of structure. And we're going to take a look at different structures of poems that you can use when you write your poetry today. So let's take a look at a few different kinds of structures we might use in our poetry today, because you're going to try one of these. So the first kind of structure I want to show you is what we've kind of been doing more so. It's called a story poem. And in a story poem, we kind of just zoom in on one small moment. It's almost like we're telling a story, but not in the normal once upon a time and order of events, and we use transition words, not that kind of story. Something's happening in the story and we're zooming in. Remember, we're zooming in on a really small moment that we want to focus on. So the story poem I'm going to show you is called Fly Fishing in the Crystal River by Christine O'Connell George, and it sounds like this. Think about how the author made this poem sound like a story. She talked about one moment in great detail. It goes like this. I hitched up my waders, stepped up into the cold water, let out some line, gather up the slack, pull my rod back, snap my wrist, and catch a pine. So in this poem, this author talks about her experience fly fishing, or it's kind of fishing. So I'm going to show you how I kind of, if you are going to do a story poem today, or if you've already done one, I'm going to show you what you might notice when you're writing a story poem. Okay, I might go, and I kind of wrote down some notes I noticed when I was reading Fly Fishing, this poem. So this is our story poem, and things that I noticed about this story poem that you are going to see if you write a story poem today is the author zoomed in on a small moment, right, of fly fishing. And that moment was her throwing in the fishing line in the water, right? She tells it kind of bit by bit. She says first she hitched up her waders, she stepped up to the water, she let out the line, she gathered it up, she rolled it up, she pulled it back. Okay, so it's one small thing. She didn't talk about her whole fishing trip, just a piece of it, right? Okay, so you can really picture what's happening in this story poem, just like a story, right? She used line breaks. Okay, we know that we have that in poems. And she used strong words. Okay, snap my wrist, catch a pine. Okay, these are some things that you'll notice you should have if you write a story poem today. Okay, small moment, have those line breaks, tell that story bit by bit. Okay, and now what I noticed during this poem is it was two trees that are talking to each other, right? Not really talking, but the poet made it sound that way. And things that I noticed in this author's conversation poem that you can use when you write yours. We have, one tree's talking to another, and you can tell this by the way the author made the little indents or spaces, right? So the first tree talks because the line begins here, right? And then the second tree talks, she gives a few spaces, and now it's the second tree's turn, right? The first tree, I think today's the day. He says, geese are on their way. It's time to go ahead. Let's change our leaves. And the other tree is saying, wind's getting colder. Oak, I think today's the day, right? So you see those little spaces. She used those to kind of show the difference between which trees are talking. That's making it a conversation, right? One person talks, then the next. Other things that this author did to make it seem like a conversation, she used what we call italics, or words that are more slanted, right? You can tell that based on how it looks. That first line is slanted and the second line is not. That's also showing when one tree talks, right? So if you try a conversation poem out today, make sure when you're showing when one thing or one person speaks, you know which one is speaking, right? And the last kind of poem structure we're going to take a look at today is called a list poem. And a list poem is exactly what it sounds like, right? It's a poem that lists certain things. This poem is called Destiny by Christine O'Connell George, and it is a list poem. Maybe you can figure out how it looks like a list poem, but then we're going to take a look at some notes I took on. So it goes like this. Some trees will become grandfather clocks, carousel horses, grand pianos, podiums or front porches, totem poles, or cathedral doors with intricate latches. Others, pencils, toothpicks, or ordinary kitchen matches. So you can tell this is a list poem because it does exactly that. It lists things that will be made out of trees, right? So things that are made of wood, right? Some trees will become this, right? You'll make a piano is made of wood, a clock is made of wood. And then at the end, you get a little extra there. So let's take a look at things I noticed from this list poem, and maybe you noticed them too. So here's our list poem. And things that I know, right, we said things made of wood. These are all the things made of wood. We have line breaks to make the list, right? We can tell it's a list because, like the conversation poem, we have that little space there. The author used an indent or a space. And then at the end, which is kind of cool, we have a little twist, right? It doesn't look like a list anymore, even though these things are made of wood too. They're just not as fancy or not as cool or elegant or as these things. So the author chose to put them in a little different in a line, not use the line breaks. So at the end, we have a little twist. It's not a list anymore, which is a nice, cool surprise, okay? So now that we've looked at 3 structures, start thinking about which poem you are going to try today. Are you going to try a story poem? Are you going to try a conversation poem with 2 characters or things talking to each other? Or are you going to try a list poem when you're listing things, the little twist at the end? I can tell you now, I'm actually going to I have written a story poem already, and you guys might remember it from one of my previous videos. But I'm going to show you how, as poets and authors, we can turn a poem we've already written, or the one that we've freshly written, that one that we've newly written, into another poem with a different structure. And I'm going to show you that with the story poem that I already have, right? Currently, it's a story poem. I did one already of these. I told the story bit by bit. I kind of told you details that I noticed. And I'm actually going to turn it into a list poem. And I'm going to show you how I do that in a moment. So let's take a look at my poem. Before we do that, let's take a look at the steps I'm going to take in order to turn this poem into a list poem. So remember, we're experimenting with different structures, right? So the way I do this is I start with a topic. Now the topic I picked was my toy box, okay? And before I wrote this poem, I said, all right, I'm writing about my toy box. So I did that. Now the second step I have to do is put it into one structure. And I'm going to show you this first structure I did. The first structure I picked is a story poem. And I'm going to show you how that goes. Take a look at my story poem, if you don't remember it. I'll read it again, but currently it's a story poem. It goes like this. My toy box is a treasure chest with wonderful riches that glow inside. A lion made of gold, a shiny figurine with shimmering curls, who wears shiny jewels and precious gemstones. Polished silver coins that make me rich, they are all hidden in my secret treasure chest. Okay, the reason that's a story poem, I'm telling you what's happening, I'm telling you details, I'm describing things. Okay, so it does start out as a story poem. That is the structure, that's how it goes. Now I'm going to show you our next step of what we're actually doing today. So I have a poem and I tried one structure. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try a different structure, okay? And the structure I'm picking to do is a list poem. I think I can make this a list poem. So let me work on that, and then we're going to read step 4 and see how this goes. So take a look at the list poem that I came up with. Now, it's basically the same poem. I didn't have to change everything. I'm just changing the structure, how I organized it. It's still about my toy box. I still mention the things inside the toy box. I changed it a little bit at the end, but I didn't have to think of a whole new idea, right? I can write about the same thing in different ways and using different structures. This is how my list poem goes. Remember, I had a story poem. Now I'm going to do a list poem. My toy box is a treasure chest with wonderful riches that glow inside. A lion of gold, a shiny figurine, glittery jewels, precious gemstones, silver coins, reminding me of all the fun that makes me grateful and rich. So I kind of changed the end a little bit there because I wanted that twist ending we talked about. Remember that little twist ending that doesn't look like the rest of the list? Because I actually, on the front of my poem here, I did have that list. You know, I listed the lion, the figurine, the jewels, the precious stones, and then I had that little twist at the end saying how they make me rich, right? So now I've showed you that.